Hello and welcome back to Quickflicks, and today we'll be taking a look at two different movies, one coming from Apple TV Plus and the other one from HBO Max. So let's start off with Wolfwalkers, coming to us from all the way in Ireland by Cartoon Saloon. Wolfwalkers tells the story of Robin, a curious girl living in the 17th century Kilkenny, Ireland, when one day she meets a girl by the name of Mabe, who is a wolfwalker, a person that can transform into a wolf at night or when they fall asleep, and they'll turn back into a human once they wake up. And one day she gets into some trouble, and the rest is history. I'm not going to talk much about the plot of this movie because to really get into the whole movie's plot is to spoil a lot of really key things that I think makes this film very special. Now, for me, my history with Cartoon Saloon has been kind of limited. I haven't seen The Secret of the Kells yet. I keep hearing that's good, and also The Breadwinner I haven't seen yet. But the only other Cartoon Saloon movie I saw was actually in college with a little film called Song of the Sea. Now, Song of the Sea is actually one of my favorite animated movies of all time, and, well, I have to say it, I think Wolfwalkers definitely topped it. Wolfwalkers, to me, is a pretty mature movie about prejudice and a lot of other different elements. I think the way that this film is animated really lends itself to the fairy tale aspects of the film, the folkloric aspects of the film. The whole way that this film is designed is just so well done. And you can see it in the other films that Cartoon Saloon has done for Irish lore. There's this design for environments that makes it look like it's part of a tapestry. They weave a tapestry for a story. And they really redefine it in this movie in various ways. But what I really love about this movie is that not just the animation, it's also the way it's animated. I love the parts with the wolves. I really love the parts with the wolves because of the way it's animated. The way it's animated really shows the emotion and the energy that these characters have. When they go into first person mode in various shots, you could see, like just running through the forests and whatnot, and it brings about this very awesome energy that this film has. And I really enjoyed that. Wolfwalkers, to me, is also a film that deals with Catholicism and versus paganism in a way that is integral to the story. And to understand this, you have to understand Ireland's history and how England basically screwed over the country's whole, culture, in a sense. Even up till kind of recently, Ireland wasn't allowed to actually practice Celtic. They couldn't speak or teach Celtic inside of schools because of their mandates. It wasn't until recently that they lifted that. And I feel like this film does have this message about, how England was basically a country that was aiming to, tame the beast that was Ireland. And I get that subtext there. I get that theme in there in the film, and I think this is probably the most mature of the films that they have made so far. Granted, I haven't seen Breadwinner and I haven't seen Secret of the Kells, but to me, this is probably the most mature I've seen of Cartoon Saloon. That's not to say that Song of the Sea wasn't mature in some ways. It's just this one dealt with very heavy topics of paganism versus Catholicism, the way England treated a lot of Irish people, the way British people were seen kind of as, invaders upon their land. And it does have some of that. So to wrap it all up here, the animation is stellar. I think the story is really good. I think the voice acting is great. The one thing I did have issue with, and it might just be my TV, it might be the movie, but I did find that there was some issues with audio, in terms of the audio mix. Some sounds were a little bit too loud that was drowning out the voices, and then sometimes the voices were drowning out the sounds. It didn't really feel like it was mixed all that often, and so it kind of left me a little bit jarred. I mean, it's not as bad as Tenet in terms of its sound mixing, but sometimes I couldn't really tell what some characters were saying. And that was something I had a problem with. And again, it could just be my TV. I'll have to watch it again with headphones, but I think this is definitely, kind of an issue for me. But I can't tell if it's a TV thing or if it's the problem with the movie. So take that with a grain of salt. But I do believe, at the end of the day, Wolfwalkers is one of my favorite films of the year, one of my favorite animated films of the year, and we rarely get 2D animated films every year. We rarely do. And I hope this one gets the Oscar nomination, and I hope it wins this year, because as much as I could easily give it to a film like Soul, which I haven't seen yet, so I don't have an opinion on it yet, it could easily go to Soul, but to be honest, Cartoon Saloon has been going to these events, these Oscars, for so many years now, that I would love to see them get nominated and win this time. This movie may not be the one that should have won, but definitely it should be a film that should be considered for winning Best Animated Feature. So in the end, I'm going to give Wolfwalkers an A-. And the next film comes to us from HBO, and that is Frank Marshall's The Bee Gees, How Do You Mend a Broken Heart? This documentary goes into the lives and backstory of how the Bee Gees came about, the history of their discography, and the various troubles that they've had both within their family and outside of it. I'm actually a pretty decent fan of the Bee Gees, and I think the first time I actually listened to the Bee Gees was either in this scene from the 10th Kingdom, or this scene from Short Circuit. But regardless of whether or not, either one of those clips was the first time I listened to the Bee Gees, the Bee Gees has been part of my family's life for a long time, even going as far as to being one of my mom's songs that she had for her wedding with my dad. Bee Gees has been part of my life. It's been part of everyone's lives. I bet you 10 to 1 you would know the sound of the Bee Gees if you listened to the first notes of Staying Alive. I mean, everyone knows that. And there was definitely some things I didn't really know about the group, and there were some things that I knew about the group. I think the thing that makes this film a little different for me is that I don't necessarily think that this is just about the history of the Bee Gees. It's also, I think, a loving tribute to the brothers that have died over the years in the group. And it's about the last member, the last brother, reminiscing on the old days and remembering it. And there's a scene towards the very end where he's talking about the memories that he has and wishing that his brothers were still there. And it's actually kind of upsetting a little bit. It's sad to think a little bit of, you go through all this fame, you go through all this, cool shit, but then, you're all alone. Your family's not there anymore, and it's, it is kind of sad. You have all these riches, but you have no one else now to share it with. And that's what I kind of got out of the ending of this documentary. But up until that point, there was definitely some good things to mention here. Now, because this film doesn't have the ability to summon the dead to bring back the other brothers, they've used clips from interviews from the past to try to stitch together a story, a sort of interview-esque story of, to stitch together the different, brothers and, talking about their story all through the years, while also coming back to the older brother that's still alive to really kind of cap the ends off a little bit in the documentary. And that, to me, is pretty good. I think the one section of this movie that they got right that I also kind of wish they expanded upon a little bit more. They did some expansion on why disco got popular, why disco was a big thing in the LGBT community. But the one thing that they did bring up that some biopics might not depict or even mention is the disco demolition of July 12th, 1979, wherein this disc jockey in Chicago basically sold out an entire Chicago Cubs arena. I think it's the Chicago Cubs arena. I could be wrong. But they sold out the arena, and they put disco records. Not just disco records. They actually go as far as to bring someone who worked at the stadium as an usher And he relays the story about how he noticed a bunch of black artists as well in the pile, thinking that they were disco, but they were R&B. Which, yeah, that whole day was just, it's crazy. I knew about it before this documentary, was released, and I still find it very sad to believe that this happened, and it did. It happened. It's very scary to think that this one genre that had been loved and adored by the LGBT community and various other communities as well would be vilified, and that was the day the disco died. No one wanted disco after that. But yeah, this documentary, though, while I do have my praises for it, I do think a lot of the times it's just kind of a standard band documentary for a lot of it. It's just basically a retelling of the history of the group, how the group, broke up and they got back together and did so many different things, like doing the soundtrack for Saturday Night Fever, which invariably gave John Travolta his starring roles forever after that point, with like Grease and other things. But I think this movie, even though it's not necessarily, an amazing documentary, it's still well done. I do find, them trying to retell the story was going to be a little bit challenging to do because they don't have the other members of the band anymore. Because, the second to last one died in 2012. I found the way that they actually incorporated interview clips of these various members at certain points in time that was recorded to make it one cohesive story. I actually really enjoyed that creative element of them trying to solve this problem of, oh, well, we can't get any modern day footage, so here's some other ones that we could loosely stitch together to make a coherent story. I like that. Again, this story is pretty good. It's a documentary about the Bee Gees, and if you're not a fan of the Bee Gees, then what are you even doing watching the film? Makes no sense to me. But yeah, in the end, I think Bee Gees, How Do You Mend a Broken Heart is a decently done documentary with some pretty creative elements that are really good, and a question about fame that I had towards the end of the film that is really kind of stuck in my head now, and I really enjoyed it. It's not a perfect documentary, but I could see this being a pretty good documentary for people to watch. And I'm going to give the Bee Gees, How Do You Mend a Broken Heart, a B+. Thank you so much for watching my review of Wolfwalkers and the Bee Gees, How Do You Mend a Broken Heart. I'll be back probably next week to do some more reviews, and then we got the Christmas special coming up. So, stay tuned, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.